Today we begin our sermon series on encountering Christ, taking a look at what happens when you encounter Jesus. To begin our series, we're looking at the idea of identity, looking at the question, who am I? To do this, we look at Luke chapter 19. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but being a short man, he could not because of the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. As we look at the story of Zacchaeus, we see a man changed by an encounter with Jesus. We look at this topic of who am I? Because to know anything, we need to know ourselves. We need to know the instrument, the person that is actually doing the observing, the categorizing, the documenting. We need to understand ourselves. Who am I? As I hear this question, my mind immediately jumps to the story Les Mis and the musical. Written by Victor Hugo many years ago, it's about the French Revolution. But more so, it's about one man during this time and how he encountered this revolution and how he encountered God. The main character's name is Jean Valjean. And Jean Valjean stole a loaf of bread to feed his sister and her child. Under the harsh legal punishment of the day, he was caught, arrested, and thrown in prison. He attempted escape and then was sentenced to many more years, to when he finally got out, he had spent 20 years in jail. Jean Valjean felt this unjust, just as you and I would think 20 years for stealing a loaf of bread, that's absurd. But during this time period, they understood, or felt they understood, that if you were a criminal, this was your nature. You were a criminal. This was your identity. Jean Valjean, when he left prison, was given a piece of paper called a passport. And just like passports today tell people, tell countries, tell officials who we are, it's our identity. So their passport also said this. But Jean Valjean's passport said he was a dangerous man, he was a criminal, he was a thief. Jean Valjean, with his passport in hand, of course, left jail and went to find work. Could not find any. Who would want to hire somebody who is a dangerous criminal? He was a thief. He looked and could find nothing. One day, as he was starving, as he was out in the cold, because nobody would take him in, nobody would hire him, nobody would give him anything, a priest stumbled across him. And the priest invites him back to his house. Jean Valjean, a deeply mistrusting man at this point, because he's known nothing but distrust himself. The world has always treated him horribly, and so he's always treated the world horribly. We don't know where this cycle began, but Jean Valjean is in the midst of this cycle of hatred, feeling hatred and then hating. Well, he comes across this priest who invites him into his house, gives him food, gives him shelter, gives him a bed to sleep in. Jean Valjean, during the middle of the night, wakes up, thinking his identity is nothing but being a dangerous man and a thief. He turns to the priest who gave him a place to stay and food, and he goes and he steals the silverware that he ate with that night. He steals things of value throughout the house. And depending on whether you're watching the musical or the movie or the story, depends on what happens next. But in one case, the priest wakes up during the middle of the night and sees Valjean stealing this. So he goes to talk to him, and Valjean hits him and knocks him unconscious and makes away with the things in the middle of the night. Well, Valjean is found the next day by some police officers who are very curious as to who he is carrying this bag of silverware. And of course, then they read his passport. He is a thief. He is a dangerous man. Well, they now know where he got this bag of things. So they take him back to where he says he was given this bag of valuable silverware. And they go to the priest, and they say to the priest, "This man here had the audacity to tell us you gave this to him." Here in this moment, Valjean's life is transformed. For the priest doesn't say, "Yes, slap him in irons." Rather, he looks at the police officers and says, "Yes, I gave that to him." And then in the musical, a beautiful song begins, as the priest then turns to Valjean and says, "My friend, you left so early. Surely something slipped your mind. You forget I gave these also." And he goes and he picks up 2 solid silver candlesticks, and he puts them into the bag as well. And he looks at Valjean and says, "Would you leave the best behind?" He turns to the police officers and says, "My friends, you may release him, for this man has spoken true. I commend you for your duty, and God's blessing go with you." He sends the police officers off with God's blessing for doing good work. Then he turns to Valjean, who would be in absolute shock of what had just happened. Valjean, who knows that in this moment he is due nothing but years more beneath the whip, in jail, hard labor. That's what he's due. Yet in this moment, the priest then bends down and says, "Valjean, with this silver, I've ransomed you. I've bought you. I've ransomed you from a life of hatred, from a life of fear, and I give you back to God." Valjean's life in this moment is transformed. He who is expecting nothing but harsh treatment is given nothing but grace, is shown nothing but forgiveness, is given nothing but love. Valjean has a moment of crisis and begins to sing the song of "Who Am I?" in the musical. His whole life transforms, and he begins a new life, no longer as Jean Valjean, but as Jean Valjean, the convict or the criminal, but as Jean Valjean, the child of God, redeemed and bought. The rest of the story of Les Mis works itself out along 2 pathways. One, the path of Valjean, this redeemed individual living during this time of revolution. The other path, it looks at the individuals in the revolution themselves, those who are discontented, those who are angry, and it follows their life as well. Their life is one of rebellion. Their life is one of building barricades. Their life is the life that picks up a gun and picks up the sword. Their life ends by the sword, by the gun. Their lives end upon broken barricades and bullets. That's how their story ends. The other path, though, is the path of Jean Valjean. And it's the path of continuing to walk in this grace that he's been given, trying to show it and share it with as many people as possible, and yet at the same time, pursued by those who demand the law's punishment. Valjean is at one point in the story given opportunity to treat those who pursued him with the weapon of the law as they lived themselves. And does he? No. He once again gives back that same attitude that was given to him by this priest. He treats them with grace. Who am I? Jean Valjean questions this again and again in the story. And the answer ultimately is he Jean Valjean the criminal? Or is he Jean Valjean, bought and redeemed by God? In our gospel reading today in the book of Luke, we come across Zacchaeus. And we know very little about Zacchaeus other than the fact that he is a tax collector for the Roman Empire. He is a child of Israel. He is a short man. He's living in Jericho. And people seem to not want to be around him, not like him. We don't know, like Valjean, what made him go down this pathway. We don't know those things in life. What was the trigger? What was the start? I don't know. But we come to the story in the gospel that Zacchaeus is treated as an outcast by others. They don't want to be around him. They don't like him. He is a helper of Rome. These people who subjugate them, these people who have taken away their freedoms, their agency, their independence. He is a sympathizer. He's worked with them. And so the people of Israel seem to not like Zacchaeus, seem to hate him. And yet Zacchaeus hears that Jesus is coming. And he wants to see Jesus. We're not told why. We don't know. He just feels it. And so this man who apparently seems to have given up everything of being Jewish to be a sympathizer, decides he'll give up even that pride that he had and decides to climb a tree. Decides to put himself on display, that all can see him up the tree and be like, that's Zacchaeus. And so there, as he climbs just to see Jesus, the most miraculous thing happens. Jesus sees Zacchaeus. Jesus stops underneath this tree, and he looks up at this man whose life has been sad, been misery. And he says, Zacchaeus, come down from this tree. He calls him by name. And he says, I'm going to eat at your house. He gives Zacchaeus status. He gives Zacchaeus identity. He gives Zacchaeus meaning. Jesus says to him, I'm going to come to your house. Zacchaeus' life in this moment is transformed. It's changed. He climbs down this tree and he goes to Jesus and says, Lord, if ever I've done anything wrong, if ever I've treated anybody, I'll give back. Now, the law demanded that if you cheated, if you stole, you gave back 20% more than what you had stolen. It was a punishment. It was a restitution to that individual who had lost. But Zacchaeus doesn't stop at 20%. No, he says, Lord, I'll give back 400%. I'll give back 4 times anything I took. Zacchaeus' life is changed. Just like in the story of Valjean, there was the law that dogged him, that wanted him to still be labeled as that criminal, as that thief, as that dangerous man. So when Zacchaeus comes down and has this encounter with Jesus, there are those that would look upon. They would look upon Zacchaeus and they would say, this is Zacchaeus. He is a sinner. And yet Jesus looks upon Zacchaeus and he doesn't say he's a sinner. Rather, he says, this man too is a child of Abraham. He's a child of the promise, of the relationship between God and man. I get a little bit touched when I talk about this encounter with Christ. Because I too, like Zacchaeus and like Jean Valjean, I'm a broken person. Who am I? My name is David Matthews, or Dave if you're one of my friends. I am at my core a broken person who's been redeemed by God's grace. I found home, I found hope, I found family in Jesus. Did I stop being broken when I encountered Christ? No. I actually discovered more brokenness. Like a piece of pottery. Found more cracks, found more chips. Oh wow, I didn't know those were there. But as I did this, I didn't feel or I didn't encounter being pushed aside or pushed out anymore. Rather, in that encountering of Christ, I encountered a new identity for myself. I was given a new name. I wasn't called broken or damaged. I wasn't labeled by society. Or maybe I was, but I didn't care. All I heard was the label that Christ gave me. I'm a child of God. I'm redeemed. I am healed. I am forgiven. I am loved. In encountering Jesus, the most miraculous thing happened as I encountered more brokenness. Jesus didn't give up on me. The miraculous happened in that each day I found God still with me. I found that each day God hadn't given up on me. Now we, like those characters in the story of Les Mis, we can try and build a life, an identity, a truth, and demand that the world obey, adhere to my truth, my ideology, my understanding, my identity. We can demand that. And in the end, we'll fight for it. But in the end, when we fight, when we pick up a weapon, then in the end, we will die by that weapon. See, whatever ideology, whatever truth, whatever identity we forge for ourselves or create, it doesn't stand up to Jesus. It doesn't stand up to what he's already got for you. It's not as beautiful. It's not as crafted in love and forged by hands that have felt pain. The identity that Jesus has for you is one that he had for you before you were even born. It's your purpose, your call. And he's never given up on you, no matter what path you've walked. No ideology, no truth, no other religions stand up to who Jesus is. Stand up to who he's called you to be, who you were designed to be. So who am I? I'm David Matthews. I'm redeemed. I am a child of God. I'm a follower of Jesus. Who are you?